Okay, for our last few questions, let's come, I believe we are. Ari, would you have helped Angelique knowing that she was an Interahamwe? Good question, Ari, very good question. I think so. I would really like to think that I would have. You know, as you read in the book about Trifine at the orphanage, the nurse at the orphanage, helping both the Interahamwe and, of course, the victims, the children. And I would like to think that I would have, but let me just say that I'm glad I didn't know when she was. And that's kind of interesting. I think that's an interesting thought, is that sometimes it's easy to feel like, man, I got to know everything. I got to know everything. Some things maybe it's better not to know. To just, like I've said that at times to people who've been starting to tell me something about somebody. I'll say, wait a minute, I'm not sure I want to know that. You know, I'm not sure it's my business, and I don't think it's going to be constructive or helpful. So I think there are times that it's good, you know, we kind of think, oh, you have to know all the truth and everything. I'd say this was a situation where I'm glad I didn't know. Alicia, how did you have the courage to stay in Rwanda when you had a chance to leave with your family? Good question. Yeah, okay. Courage is contagious. If I didn't say that earlier during our Skype call, I sure believe courage is contagious. I think that sometimes making a decision might not require as much courage as following through with the decision. I need to think about that. I should probably do some journaling about that. But I think that to make the decision just seemed obvious. They're right there. These people will be killed if we leave. We were quite certain of that. And so I think that the decision was very clear. It was hard, but it was clear to follow through, and day after day. Yeah, that's probably where the courage would come in. And I would say, when I said courage is contagious, I had courageous people all around me. I think that courage also comes from stories of different people. I think it's contagious that way, even through, you know, history, through time. I definitely all my life grew up, you know, as a kid who believed in God and you know, really read the stories of Jesus and the Bible and stuff, that those stories had impacted me. And I think probably years ago, before the genocide, I would have said, well, God gave me courage. But I don't find that answer as super helpful at times. If people are really curious to know the answer, like, oh, God, well, how? And that's why I like to break it down. I think it was God working through Gasikwa. I think it was God working through Teresa, my wife. That courage that came contagiously, I see the source of that in God. At the same time, I don't need to argue with anybody who doesn't believe in God or anything like that, because what will be accomplished by arguing? But we can still just really embrace and encourage courage. How's that? Encourage courage. When you see people doing courageous things, something that puts somebody else in front of themselves, something that shows risk, that's something that I want to be an encourager of in all people. I think that courage is something that, you know, I'm sure I had people who encouraged me through my life, and past experiences would also help you have courage. So, good question, Alicia. What was your reaction when you moved to Rwanda in the early 1990s? We thought that it was like the most beautiful place in the world that we had ever been. Green everywhere, hospitable, generous, kind, loving people, opportunities to partner and make a difference. We were really in like a honeymoon phase when we moved there. Sadly, it was only 6 months after we moved there that the war started, but even then, the war that went on for 3 years before the genocide, even then, we still found much to celebrate and to love in this country. Just a beautiful country, and love the people. Yeah. Change in pace a little bit, Veronica and group. Why were you referring to experiences of the people from World War II? Why were those stories and those people important to you? How do you connect with them? Now, Veronica, are you, maybe you're talking about in the book where I quote Viktor Frankl. Again, it would be great if we were having a live conversation, but I'm going to take it like that you're talking about, books that I read during the first 3 weeks stuck in my home about the Holocaust and Viktor Frankl. I think there is a very common thread. I mean, the most common thread is people thought they'd solve problems by getting rid of somebody. That's the common thread through genocide, through the Holocaust, and tragically, even in today's politics. All of the refugees from Syria, and people think, oh, we're going to fix the problem by getting rid of the refugees. Or we're going to, here in America, they talk about, we got to make the borders strong and we have to, keep people out. And this idea of all of this, you can see my hands up. That kind of thinking is a thread that runs through all of these stories. And it's important we realize it's there so we can address it. And not just to tell other people or politicians to address it, but for me, myself, to address it in my own thinking. Sometimes I think, oh boy, it'd be easier on this project if that guy wasn't, he's such a difficult person. And check that out. I just said, he's such a difficult person. Restorative or polarizing, okay? So this whole idea of, it is important to look at those stories there and see how we continue at times to keep making the same mistake, but I'm not going to fall into the trap that says we'll always be doing that. I think we are learning from those stories. Paula, is that the correct pronunciation? You are the last one here. There's no exercise better for the heart than reaching down and lifting people up. I like that. That's not from the book, is it? Anyway, how did you practice the information in the quotation and put others before yourself? What did it take to develop the courage to stay, even if it meant losing your life? Well, we have referred earlier a bit to courage. How did you practice the information? Yeah. And put others before yourself. I think a big part of that, putting others before myself, would be examples. My parents. Our home, when I was a kid, was open to different people. They came and lived with us in our home, came seeking refuge. The example of my parents would be a big part of that, and other people that I respected in growing up, and people I read about in history. I'm just thinking, asking myself, did we put it into practice before the genocide? Actually, before the genocide. My wife ran a hotel in our home. When people would come to the capital city from out at remote mission stations and stuff, they often stayed at our home. So that's interesting. I've never connected those two things before, of just, hospitality and kind of almost like running a hotel. Teresa was always having guests in our home. She's such an amazing hostess. But yeah, I think that those were some of the things that would have impacted this idea of reaching down and lifting people up. It's not always like people who are down. It's just people who need help. It's not always reaching down, but sometimes it's reaching over or even reaching up, helping people who need help. We often perceive somebody as maybe on a higher level. Not good. But reaching out, I'd say, would be one thing. And then to develop the courage to stay if it meant losing your life. That one is definitely, for me, connected to my faith with God. My belief that this world is not the end, is not the final chapter. My belief that there is a life after life, I'm sure that had an important part in the decision. At the same time, I think I'd find it super hard to live with myself if I was always just putting my safety first. I got to work as a volunteer firefighter for 10 years, and any of those situations, I think we're wired to reach out and help. We're wired to serve. And when we experience that confirms that wiring, that strengthens those neural pathways, that myelin sheath gets stronger and stronger. And so I think even little practices, picking up trash, in the bath. You wash your hands after using the bathroom, and you dry with that paper towel. You use it like a glove, and you pick up a piece of trash on the floor and you put it in the trash can. That we can make even the smallest situations better is developing pathways in our brain that I think will help us in times when things could be much worse. Hey, thank you guys for your patience and waiting for a while for me to get these questions done. I hope it won't get too long to upload it to YouTube, but I really have enjoyed being with you, enjoyed your questions. Period 1, I didn't see any questions, so I'm assuming we finished for you, period 1. And period 2, I hope we'll cross paths again. If you have other questions, send them through your teacher. Happy to do my best. And this just talking to the camera wasn't too bad, since I already talked to you guys and I saw your level of commitment. That means a lot to me when I get to have these conversations. So wish you all the best. Take care.